Good morning, it's the 25th of May 2017, almost 2 years since I filed my case, Lewis versus Minister of Justice and another at the Equality Court. A month ago, Judge Veldhuizen directed the Legal Aid Board to supply reasons why that body had declined to assist me in a matter affecting the life of the Truth Commission and its final report. Needless to say, it's taken another month, and also after me having to approach the court with inquiries as to why the lateness, why the tardiness, that today I received a charming letter from an attorney supposedly on behalf of the Legal Aid Board, claiming that the reason why they declined to assist me in the first instance was that, according to them, the case has no reasonable prospects of success. That the case itself is prescribed. Not only is this an incompetent opinion devoid of any merit, but it's pretty easy to see that the law of prescription does not at all affect, when it comes to crime against humanity, there is no prescription. And in any event, the events related to the case are all current. One is merely to look at the statements made by the Naspers Corporation, or the second respondent, 2 days after I filed the case. Blatant dishonesty, blatant lies, where they are revising the historical record. And the application itself was brought to defend the Truth Commission and its final report, to defend the report as sufficiency of evidence before the courts, and to compel the minister, who appears to have abdicated responsibility through the TRC unit, to compel him to defend the report wherever it's attacked as such, whether it's in a court of law or in the public, and so on, and that one shouldn't have to prove, for instance, that apartheid happened. There are certain facts, the historical record of what occurred, even though it is incomplete. If you read the report, the first report issued by the first Commission of Inquiry into Gross Violations, it is an incomplete report, and as part of my case is demonstrating some of the failings of that first Commission of Inquiry, and suggesting areas and corrective action and steps which can be taken. Now, I'm sure a lot of the victims of apartheid and survivors of apartheid, of which I am one of those survivors of that egregious system, having fought against the regime and suffered the consequences, I'm sure everybody out there will be outraged to discover that there are opinions within legal circles that there's been prescription of rights. Sure, apartheid happened more than 20 years ago. In cases of murder, for instance, there is no law of prescription. A crime against humanity, there's no law of prescription. So I don't know how one arrives at this opinion, if only it's some kind of way, legal code of diminishing the complaint as such, that a complaint of racism, a complaint of unfair discrimination brought as a result of racists revising the historical record after the fact, changing the record, the facts that are in that report. For instance, Naspers was found guilty of gross violations. It was not an innocent party, and the attempt by the company to paint itself as some kind of innocent party, after 2 days after I filed my case, they issued a mea culpa, right? That took them 2 decades to get to the point where they issue a mea culpa to the heavens, and a case-limited apology to the heavens, where I myself have not received such an apology. It's been issued off the 19th floor of the Naspers building on the foreshore by the CEO, who then proceeds to operate willy-nilly without, we don't have to change anything in the corporation. We can continue as per usual with our multiracialist ethos. And myself as a non-racialist, I've objected to the multiracial perspective issued by that corporation, where there are these distinct race groups. So I'm on the receiving end of the discrimination without any remedies as such, except to appeal to the Equality Court as a court of first and last resort as such, where these issues of race discrimination should be dealt with. And that there shouldn't be this problem where I am having to defend the report all by myself without access to an attorney. And the issue of a substantial injustice which arises out of that burden, of having to carry that burden, bearing in mind that the way the legal process works, it's a combative, robust, combative system where the other party has attorneys and advocates, and they can walk into court at the same time that they feel that they've got the right to attack me. They can attack my standing before the court, they can attack my competence, they can attack my history of involvement in the struggle. Where there's a previous example of this happening in another court, in a labour court, which is a collateral case. It has absolutely nothing to do with the case which has been lodged at the Equality Court, except for the fact that the Naspers Corporation is involved in both cases. As such, the earlier case is a situation where one of their subsidiaries, Media 24, and one of their divisions was involved, and there are some serious allegations now stemming from the release of the records at court, where there's now a case of perjury and a case of subornation of perjury that I've lodged against their advocate and their sole witness, the poster child for apartheid community newspapers, Annalene Bean. So, to wrap up, what are we going to do? What's the next way forward? Well, obviously, providing the other party they're going to get a receipt of my application. Am I going to avail myself of some kind of another roundabout of an internal process, irrespective of what their general attorney at the Legal Aid Board thinks? He still has to answer to the court. The application to the Legal Aid Board, according to the rules and regulations, is supposed to run concurrently with the court. The Legal Aid Board may be an autonomous entity, but it is an adjunct institution to the courts. It cannot on its own determine the outcome of events. They cannot determine, in terms of the sub judice rule, they cannot determine what the outcome, what the prospects are of success of such a case. Now, the fact that they're banding around this legal code where supposedly you can poo-poo an application on the basis of its being vexatious or frivolous, I can understand that. But to say that there are no reasonable prospects of success in the case brought to defend the Truth Commission in its final report is outrageous. And it speaks to the abdication of responsibility by the Minister of Justice, because the Minister of Justice is one of the parties. It speaks to the abdication of responsibility by the TRC unit, by certain commissioners of the TRC, including Yasmin Suka, one of the bodies that I also applied for legal assistance from the so-called Foundation for Human Rights. Now, these are people who have raised enormous amounts of money subsequent to that commission of inquiry, on the basis that they are now flying around the world, selling the rest of the world on this new process called Truth and Reconciliation and supposedly restorative justice. And yet on the ground, on the day-to-day issues, you end up with a situation where, to my knowledge, there's several thousand victims, survivors of apartheid, who also don't have access to legal assistance, who have been attempting over the past decades to gain access to their rights, to gain fair hearing, to look at issues that are adjunct, augmented to the first Commission of Inquiry. And nothing has been done. It's been this shell game of, on the one hand, certain individuals making a lot of money out of national reconciliation, out of the so-called broad-based economic empowerment. Turns out there are just a few people in certain sectors that are making money. It's a mafiosi government administration that we face in this country. You don't need me to tell you this, because Cyril Ramaphosa himself, the deputy president of our country, has made similar allegations and have many high-profile members of the ruling party, that the party itself is finding itself increasingly adverse to the current administration, which is increasingly isolated with less room to maneuver. And might I suggest that this latest instance, where the Legal Aid Board poo-pooing the action at the Equality Act Court, is embarrassing. It's highly embarrassing. So to wrap it up, this is David Robert Lewis. I'm the plaintiff in the case Lewis versus Lewis versus the Minister of Justice, and NASFES, the apartheid media firm, which, as we know, refused to participate in the Truth Commission, and has now, according to the allegations in my case, documents which are filed, has made certain statements, all of which are amount to discrimination, unfair discrimination against struggle journalists such as myself. So, Luther continue.